Just so we can begin, I know that all of our librarians will be trickling in after this, but we have so much to talk about and so many different new and exciting things to share that I am really hoping I'm going to keep it within time. Before we get started, I am going to pass it to some of our friends from the New York State Library. Lauren, if you'd like to say hello and greet everyone and get us all started.
Yes, thanks, Lo. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Moore. I'm the New York State Librarian, and I just want to take 2 seconds to thank you all for being here, not just for joining this community so that we can continue learning together about digital inclusion, but also for all of the amazing work that you all have been doing, not just since the pandemic in 2020, but since the beginning of, of digital inclusion and digital equity. I have learned so much from all of you, and I'm so excited for this toolkit to be available so that we can continue to advance digital inclusion work in New York's libraries. And I would like to thank the team at the New York State Library who has put in a ton of work on this project, our friends and partners at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance who have led the way, and of course the Institute of Museum and Library Services who provided ARPA funding that made this toolkit and a lot of the other work that's been coming out of the State Library and our partners over the past 2 years. So thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this webinar, and thanks, Lo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I hope you're in the right place to be talking about the New York State Library 2022 Digital Inclusion Toolkit. I am going to drop the link to that in the chat. I am assuming most of you have seen this, but if a friend or a coworker said, hey, join me in this webinar, it's going to be really cool, and you don't know what this is about, welcome aboard. We're so excited to have you here. Don't worry, I promise I'm going to explain everything. So my name is Lo Smith, my pronouns are they, them, and I am a senior programs manager here at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I am also one of the primary authors of the Digital Inclusion Toolkit. So if you hated it, feel free to DM me right now. If you loved it, I will just be accepting praise. I'm joking. I come from a library background. One of the reasons that I was so enthused to work on this project is that I am a public librarian. Even during my time with NDIA, I will still identify as a public librarian because I spent 9 years working on the front lines of public libraries, starting out as a professional assistant at Baltimore County Public Libraries. So anybody who's familiar with the Mid-Atlantic, I was at Baltimore County Public as a professional assistant, as a librarian 2, working my way up, learning more and more about technology and the digital divide, bringing public health connections into our work. I made the jump to the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which is the public library of Baltimore City, where I worked first as a technology fellow with a fellowship, and then I ended up somehow as the director of digital inclusion initiatives, which was a fantastic thing to do. Once we got Baltimore City really solid, I decided to make the jump to the national work and teamed up with NDIA, where I have been ever since, but my heart lives in libraries. And I just got a bunch of really great book recommendations too, but should you feel the need to share a book recommendation in the chat, please do it anytime. While I do love technology and digital inclusion is where my heart lives, I am still always on the hunt for a great dark academia book or any sort of great young adult mystery. So any recommendations for me at any time, throw those in the chat. Feel free to email them to me or DM them directly. Enough about me. Let's talk about who the National Digital Inclusion Alliance are and why we are the ones who teamed up with the New York State Library to create this Digital Inclusion Toolkit. As you can tell by this photo, we are a team of really joyous folks and a unicorn balloon who are working towards advancing digital equity nationwide. We have over 950 affiliates, and they are spread out through 48 states, Puerto Rico, DC, the Virgin Islands, and quite a few other territories. And we're working with over 12 tribal entities. We are out here to make sure that everyone within our network are able to really thrive and do the work that they need to and be supported. So what is that work? We are out here doing practitioner support, and that's what creating a toolkit, working with librarians, all of that is about, y'all. We are the practitioners of digital inclusion, and we are here to make sure that we can do our best that we have the tools, the connection, the community, and the really the little critical pieces to pull together to be able to serve our communities as best we can. We also do policy work. Every day I'm impressed and a little bit terrified by my policy team and the work that they're doing, including things like discussing the concept of digital discrimination with the FCC. We do awareness building. Did anybody hear about Digital Inclusion Week that was in the beginning of October, where cities lit up their town halls green for us, and we all talked about the fact that digital inclusion is the future and we need to all be working towards a digitally equitable future? That's a huge thing that we do. We also have a data and research team, and they are also a growing, fantastic group, and I'm going to share some of their more recent tools today. Out here trying to figure out exactly what the digital divide situation is. While we do know that we can find data on how many devices are in communities and how many folks have connections, it's really much harder to determine things like, how do we judge an internet service provider? How do we determine if a city is living up to their digital inclusion potential? And how do we make sure that we are changing some of those numbers and metrics in a positive way? So lots and lots of stuff going on there. So why digital equity? Why not digital equality? This is a conversation that I have in a lot of places, from sort of like gas stations to grocery stores to family dinners. And these next few slides, I'm hoping if there's one thing you really take from this conversation and webinar, it will be the information on these few slides. Please take it to all of your holiday family gatherings over the next 3 or 4 months. Take this vocabulary, take these talking points, and begin to share with your friends and family and anybody around you why digital equity is important. It's because we can provide everyone with the exact same things, but it will not always have the desired impact. We developed this little slide to demonstrate the need for equity and ensuring that we are supporting some communities, and that some communities already have exactly what they need. With digital equality, it would involve giving everybody all the exact same things and hoping that that's going to be enough for some, but knowing it will be too much for others. If you're familiar with that one where everybody's trying to watch the baseball and standing on the boxes and the fences there, exactly. We are moving towards digital equity. So what is digital equity? Digital equity is the goal. That is where we are going together as a community, as a universe, hopefully, and especially as a group of practitioners, and librarians have been critical to digital equity for years. This is the goal. It's the condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for that full participation in society, democracy, and the economy. That is a really long-winded way of saying that everybody deserved to be stuck in the Taylor Swift ticket queue earlier this week. Every single one of us should have the ability to doom scroll on TikTok if we need to. Everyone should be able to let their family members know that they are sharing false information on Facebook. And we should be able to do things like request our ballot to vote. We should be able to do our banking and any investing that we want to. And we also should be able to just talk to our friends using technology. I think in the early era of the pandemic, we really felt how divided we all were and began to see how our friends and family members use technology differently. Digital inclusion. So this is what we are doing. That's why we have the Digital Inclusion Toolkit. It's the activities. This is sort of the action items. These are the activities necessary to ensure that all individuals and communities, including the most disadvantaged, have access to and the use of information communication technologies. And when we talk about digital inclusion, often when I'm working with some of our digital navigators in training, we think about the fact that not everybody wants to participate, but it's about the access and having that option. I know, especially from all of y'all up in New York, I'm originally from Pennsylvania. We have large Amish communities, and everybody always brings up the Amish during trainings. It's all about being able to opt in or opt out to the level of technology and digital inclusion you would like to have. So thinking about everyone having that access, but not everybody necessarily needing to leverage that. And then we think about the digital divide. I think this is the term most of us are really familiar with. We hear digital divide all of the time. And we know what it means. It's that gap between those who have the affordable access, the skills, and the support to effectively engage online, and those who do not. And one of the things that we here in the digital inclusion sphere really think about and talk about is how the digital divide is really disproportionately affecting people of color, Indigenous peoples, households with low incomes, people with disabilities, people in rural areas, and older adults. We are seeing all of these already vulnerable and marginalized populations being doubly hit by the digital divide. That's why we're here doing this digital inclusion work. We have found that often there are sort of three areas we like to focus on in the grand scheme of solutions. There are a lot more. We could dig deeper, we could go stronger and wilder, but today as librarians, there are really three areas we can focus on. It's not up to us to be able to build infrastructure and a lot of these other high level things. If any of y'all do know how to lay fiber, amazing. Text me. I'd love to hang out and learn how to build internet infrastructure from you. But for us, we can help with the connections to affordable broadband. We can help with the selection and connection to appropriate devices. And the biggest thing we as librarians end up engaging in are these digital skills trainings. So that is the big bad overview of digital inclusion and digital equity. I know it sounds heavy and it sounds big, but I guarantee you we are already doing digital inclusion work in our everyday librarian lives. So it's not too hard. So a quick note on how to use this toolkit. I dropped the link in the chat earlier. I think many of you have already reviewed the toolkit, or you've heard about it, or you plan to read it after you came to this webinar because you forgot. Totally fine. Some of the important steps for me is that I would love everyone to come to this toolkit with an open mind rather than really looking for what will be specific to their branch or to their community. Looking at this as what is this? How does it work? Who might this work for? I want everyone to think about this as an exploration and an experiment. Just because we may have tried this before, just because this may be something that we don't see serving our community, doesn't mean we don't have to try it. Working from a patron first and a community first perspective. So thinking about not so much, do we have the laptops to do this? Do we have the staff members to do this? But instead, would this serve our community? And then we'll figure out the rest of it on the way. And then really meeting our patrons and our staff where they are. This is really critical for me because as someone who is working in digital equity, my first customers and my first community were my staff members for most of my libraries. I spent more time training staff members on their digital skills and building them up to be sort of this digital skill core than I did training community members, because I'm one person and I can only have so much impact. So we want to make sure that our staff are being included in all steps of our digital inclusion work, whether they are receiving training and support or they are being asked about what we see as a need in the community. I know I've been talking a lot, so now it is time for an activity. I am going to drop a Jamboard in the chat, as well as amazing Amanda, my absolute right and left hand most days, has dropped a Jamboard in the chat. We are going to explore this Jamboard and really think about the different words we use to describe our technology needs. Learning about the ways that our community members are specifically expressing themselves can be really critical to how we communicate about technology, community needs and desires, and even guides our reference questions. So go ahead and click on that Jamboard. And I am going to share the Jamboard on the screen briefly. And also, if you are familiar with Jamboards, can I get an emoji in the chat just to see how many folks are going to need a little bit more support on getting started with this Jamboard? Any emoji will do. All right, I see some emojis in the chat. I am going to see if I can switch my screen share and just show off the Jamboard. I see everybody already moving around in it, but just briefly, I want to cover the Jamboard. You can go ahead and grab a Post-it note right here using the sticky note, and then you're able to type in it. This is my note. And when you hit save, it will auto-populate to the top up here, and you can drag it to where you'd like on the page. And I am going to just make sure we rearrange these pieces a little bit. Oh gosh, I may also relocate the title down to here just to make sure that we're all fighting with the title. Go for it, y'all. We do have a series of different pages within this Jamboard. We have what are some ways that community members talk about digital skills, specifically grouping over here, not having the digital skills they need, and how do they ask for what they need to learn. On the next page, we want to think about how do community members talk about technology. What are some regional terms or slang terms community members may use that you're not going to find when you're using resources that are created nationwide? And what are some terms that you find helpful when working with community members? And then on our last one, I would love to hear some examples of how you explain digital inclusion to your neighbor, your library board of directors, and to your oldest or youngest family member. So I'm going to give about 5 minutes and ask everybody to sort of take off using these arrows. You'll be able to check on the next frames. And then if anybody wants to help me come together with some common themes that we have found and ways that we will be able to adapt our work around digital inclusion, we will talk about that. So I am going to mute myself and let everybody work quietly for a moment. I am watching all of these Post-it notes just absolutely take over our first section of the Jamboard. So I want to give you all some time to keep working on the second and third frames, but are there any volunteers who have really recognized a trend or very specific things that they have seen on this first frame who would like to unmute and share with us? We love an observation. Just go for it.
Well, that a lot of people really don't know how to use the computers that we have.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot of the people, these quotes that we have, they also demonstrate that there are a lot of ways that people are asking for help. And I think, oh, I've got a hand. Go for it, Claire. I don't hear Claire. Oh, your microphone is broken. Oh no. Amy put in the chat, there's a lack of trust and a fear of failure. And go ahead and type in the chat, Claire. I'll be able to read that aloud for everyone. But I think it's some of these things that we're also seeing of discomfort. It's silly, my grandkids do this stuff so fast. How do I print? Why is it always in a different spot? These are all ways that our community members have been expressing their needs. And then when we're thinking about how our community members talk about technology, I really like a lot of these examples we have here, especially the Obama phone for the cell phones through Lifeline. Oh my gosh, yes, all the time. Specific slang terms for ISP providers. Just the usage of iPad, and then how we adapt our language. Don't panic, we can do this together. You can't break anything. I love that one. We're all here to learn. Also making sure that we're using really basic and common language, talking about it in the terms of the tasks we need to do rather than the things we need to use. And how are we describing digital inclusion to our community members? I like that it's about everyone having internet access the same way that you do. So talking to our oldest and youngest family members, we are a meeting place for skills and technology. We can get people in the door and promote our library. Great ways to talk to your directors about digital inclusion. And then talking to our neighbors is it's about making sure everyone has access to computers and the internet and knows how to use them. All right, I am going to keep this Jamboard going. You can continue to add to it throughout the time that we're here, and you will still have access to it during our entire time together, because I want to make sure that everyone will be able to, making sure I'm sharing the right slide. Yes, we'll be able to engage with it and take this home. Also, Claire says that they worked in an affluent suburb with retired executives, and they are very tired of being frustrated by technology change. Oh, that is a huge, huge thing. Just pulling my slides back together as we move through. So that was a quick and brief example of one of the activities within the toolkit of working on developing our vocabulary surrounding technology and digital inclusion. So let's get into some of the pieces of the toolkit, the tools that are there, quick tips, new tools that have come out since we released the toolkit. I'm going to move a little fast because we have, a shorter amount of time, about an hour and 5 minutes, and I have a heck of a lot of things to tell you. So starting where you are, I know we started on this, we mentioned this in the very beginning, but this is about starting where we are, not expecting that we're going to move in leaps and bounds, but really getting comfortable with our current situation. When working in digital inclusion, especially if you were a leader, a manager, maybe the technology person on staff, it can be a little discouraging when we first start talking about a lot of the needs for technology teaching and working with our communities and upskilling our staff, because we can get resistance. And change is hard, especially in libraries. I think many of us have felt that we are comfortable in what we do. So make sure that we are preparing our staff and our libraries for this critical success. Within the toolkit, there are a couple of different options for engaging on auditing your current offerings and working with your staff to make sure that they have the skills before we start really working on providing digital skills to the community and working one-on-one. I have shared some of the tools for success and a little bit of an explanation, especially when it comes to upskilling our own staff. One of the critical pieces is we want to build comfort and confidence with technology before we start saying, all right, everybody's going to be taking one-on-one appointments with the community. And that's okay. We are all starting from different places, so we can assess our current skills, and we have a couple of different options for that. And then our staff are also our customers. When it comes to digital skill building and when it comes to a lot of these individual specifics, we want to make sure that we are offering the same things we offer to our customers to our staff, because in the end, we are also our constituents, we're our own patrons, and I bet a lot of us are checking out a lot of books. When it comes to auditing our current offerings, that's also a recommendation within the toolkit of how to do that. But another great way to ensure that we are looking at what we have is talking to everybody involved. I discovered in many libraries that I've worked in that the people who are providing some of the more unique tech support were our security guards, because many community members were more comfortable discussing things with them. And my security guards were really savvy about using their smartphones. So often they would know the solution of moving between an Android to an iPhone. And if you needed to get something printed, then half of the librarians there. When it came to auditing the digital inclusion support that was being provided within those branches, some of the first people I talked to were the security guards. And I said, I'm not here to judge, but just I'd like to know about how many times per day do you help somebody with a smartphone? Most of them shook their heads and said, at least 5. And that's when I realized we really needed to be building out that support in a more sustainable manner, rather than relying on our staff who are there to keep us safe, to also teach people how to screenshot, save, and send. There's a really great tool that we've created on page 12 of our toolkit, and it's a great way to look at what we're offering, but to remember that digital inclusion practices come in many forms and from many different people within our libraries. In our Start Where You Are, within our toolkit, there is a lot on learning about your community. I know many of us feel like we are experts on our communities. We've worked in them for years. We have been here. We know what the needs are, but the great news is there are plenty of tools and ways that we can make sure that we are documenting all of that, get it all out on paper so that we can continue to move forward and really make impactful decisions, as well as work from a responsive community point of view. So our research tools. Who loves research? Who here loves data? Your librarians, of course you do. One of the really fantastic tools that we have for research within our community, I've got heart eyes in the chat. I love this. Y'all are so lucky, because the New York State Library and the New York State Digital Equity Portal was created just for you. So I am going to swap my screen once more. Let me make sure I can do this in a way that doesn't make us all too crazy. I'm going to move this over here. And then I'm going to switch to my screen share to the New York State Digital Equity Portal. Can everyone see a New York State Digital Equity Portal and not my Taylor Swift tickets? If you see my Taylor Swift tickets, no, you didn't. All right, I'm going to assume we're good on the New York State Digital Equity Portal. This is a tool that is unique to your state. It was created just to document digital equity and digital inclusion data. So taking a look at the whole state, we can see that it's been broken down into these little bricks, tract by tract, with information on the number of households, the percentage without computing devices, total populations, internet at home. Basically everything you've ever needed to know about your region is right here. Within the research chapter that we've provided, there's tons of information on how to do this kind of research and pull this all together from all of these other sources. We've been using the census, we've been using FCC data. Y'all live in New York. You don't even have to know how to build all of this on your own. It's been done for you. We can look at things like lack of connectivity for children. We can look into whether or not it is cable, fiber optic, DSL, cell plan only, satellite internet services. We can even see a rough estimate of the devices that everyone has. We can look up the specific library system within the state and just look at data surrounding your public library system. This feels like the best cheat code when it comes to getting to know our communities. There also is a quick tutorial. We can explore other map layers so we can really get deeper within this. And there are tutorials here to really help you out when it comes to first exploring it. I like to go with the method of just always messing around within a data portal and hoping, again, that I can't break it. But I do recommend testing out some of those other their tutorials and really learning how to make this the best you can. It sometimes takes a minute to load for me because I think I clicked on explore more map layers one too many times. Right, it's taking a little bit longer than expected, but that's quite all right. So these are some of the other layers within the map that we can take a look at. And we also have it bound with boundaries of the public library systems. So you can find yourselves and specifically look at just your public library system. Some of you are visiting the website with me and slowing it down. I'd like to think that we have the sharing capability that it wouldn't slow down too much if we all looked at it together. But as librarians and digital inclusion practitioners, I think we all know exactly what's really going on. I am going to bop back over to my slides. I just wanted to give you a quick taste of the magic that is the digital equity portal, and making sure that I have my slide manager up. All right, I'm back. So there is our portal that we can take a look at, and some of our other data sources. Oh, yes, you can see exempt organizations to see potential library partners. Thank you, Tor. I love when everyone starts using a tool together and starts developing their own immediate best practices. That's why I like hanging out with my people. Librarians are special. So these were the first three major data portals that we recommend when you're researching your region to get to know your digital inclusion needs, to be able to start documenting things like how many houses have internet, what is the device situation, how are we serving our community here. But we also have a few more research tools available. Let me see if I can get my slide to switch. Why is my slide not sliding? There we go. So I included a few more items that have been released more recently. And for those of you who are familiar with the Affordable Connectivity Program, there's an Affordable Connectivity Program tracker. And there are two different ones that have been created, one by USAC, who are the folks who manage the data surrounding it. And there's also one that was created by the Institute for Self-Reliance. And they are really fantastic trackers that you can play with, as well as the Microsoft Digital Equity Dashboard. I know that as librarians, when we see things with the like the corporation name right out front, we've been trained to be a little suspicious. But it's a fantastic digital equity dashboard. I definitely encourage you to explore these and include data from them when you want to create sort of a bit of a snapshot of your region, whether it is your full library system or just surrounding your specific branch. When we're doing research, we really want to make sure that we are able to learn as much as we can about both the demographics and then the possible need as a result of all of the data that we've gathered. But often we start there and it's really high level. We're getting numbers, there's margins of error. So we'll need to try something about more assessment. The assessment method that we really recommend when you're getting started in your digital inclusion world, you want to know what people want, you want to know what people need, is to work with your community leaders and trusted members of specific population to really build that picture. We recommend some of these different assessment playbooks, and we have some sample assessment questions that you can ask to trusted members of communities to say, what do you think we need? Assessment like this is a much easier way. You start with the data and you're thinking, oh, I think everybody in this community is going to need a laptop. And then during your assessment, working with community leader, you may say, I think everybody in this area is going to need a laptop. And you're sitting down with someone who may be a church leader or the head of the Boys and Girls Club, or works directly with everyone at the YMCA or a community schools liaison. And they say, you know, I've actually discovered a lot more people have laptops than we thought, but like no one's able to connect them to the internet. Here are some anecdotal things that I have seen about our community, and here are the needs that I have been trying to work with. So with our assessment, we are asking sort of targeted community members to give perspective and share their information so that we can begin to expand out on that data. Often we are the people as librarians who have been tapped for these kind of assessments. If there have been digital equity plans being developed in your area or digital equity coalitions, someone has probably called you and said, can I talk to you about the state of things? And if they haven't, I would be prepared for it in the near future. So that's where we start with the data. We've moved out into assessment, talking to those key community leaders, and then we can move one layer deeper into direct surveys. With our surveying tools, we've shared a surveying tool as well as a survey script. Surveys are different from assessments. When we survey, we are talking directly to the folks that we are hoping to serve. With assessments, we're trying to get an overview of who we may be serving. This is really about talking to the person who is going to be attending our library needs, joining us for our digital skills work, and they are going to be a critical member of our community moving forward. So we want to make sure we are building that trust, we are having open, clear communication, and we are not making that community member feel as though they are just a data point. We have some best practices and samples in the script with explanations of how we use these different pieces within it and why it's critical for our communication. I love surveys, but I have found that surveys are most effective, like most things, when we are administering them in person directly and with that extra sort of like bonus smile and explanation. So those are a couple of the different ways: the research, the assessment, the survey. I also wanted to share something that my colleagues in our research department have recently released. This is not included in the toolkit because it is such a recent release. It's our asset mapping tools and template. We have a asset mapping recent release. I always like to think of us as similar to Taylor Swift. How many times will I mention Taylor Swift in one webinar? I apologize. But we have recently released a really fantastic tool and guide for asset mapping. I'm also going to drop specifically the fancy little web page for it in the chat. Asset mapping is very similar to a bit of the research, a bit of the assessment that we were looking at. This is where we are looking around and engaging directly with these community organizations and figuring out who's doing what. So there's a tool for that because it can get really overwhelming to try to organize all of that information. I know I'm talking to librarians and y'all would have all developed a system for it, but we did make a tool so that our more layman practitioners of the world who do not have the same experience and background that we do are able to cope with the sheer amount that they'll be learning. So asset mapping is more than just looking around and going, well, they're doing classes and they're doing this. It's sort of this approach to information gathering, and it's a framing of all of the things that we have that make our community fantastic and that work together. It really centers on the expertise and the resources that are out there. We probably all have lists that we have been maintaining and keeping on at our information desks and in various places. But once we can get them into an asset mapping database or framework, it's way easier to kind of navigate. And one of the best things that my favorite phrase is, it's based on collaboration rather than extraction. It's not about how do we figure out what we can get from everyone around us, but rather where are our partners? And when one of our friends put in the chat that there were options to look at exempt organizations for possible partners, I was like, you are jumping ahead to asset mapping already. That's where we can look at those potential partners and really think about who we're going to work with. And it's also about community ownership and investment in the community-based solutions. One of the things I love about asset mapping is often when people come to me and say, I would like to do this for digital inclusion in this community, I say, well, okay, well, who's doing that now? And they look at me and I look at them and they look at me and I look at them. And now it's time for us to look at who in the community is already doing this work and how do we support that work. I love this little graphic for asset mapping with the digital equity organizations and all of the other spheres coming out of it. So when we think about our asset mapping, when we're looking at our sort of overview of our community and all of those assessments and getting to know everything that's happening before we jump into services, we want to make sure that we're looking at the digital equity organizations, but also people running digital inclusion programs like us. But other places where we never really realized that there has been similar work being done. I have discovered computer labs in church basements. I have discovered coding programs taking place in park pavilions and agricultural extensions that were running tech extensions all around me. And if I hadn't taken the time to stop and look around, I never would have discovered all of these other critical components that were going into this. And I would have never known that these were potential friends and partners. These are sort of the areas that we put within our asset mapping tool if you do choose to use it for this kind of part of your research and assessment. We've got little areas so that you can kind of break down all of the concepts that are coming at you, but you can also create your own. We're librarians and we're really comfortable with metadata. We're good at knowing that we can choose multiple fields. We're great at tagging things and making things searchable. So I have full faith that the people who will use an asset mapping tool the most to organize all of the information that they have are going to be my librarians, and you guys are also maybe going to rewrite half of it and make it serve all of your purposes. Please go wild when it comes to asset mapping, or any level of this kind of organization of resources around you when it comes to working through your digital inclusion practices, because there's really no limit on what we can do when we work together. All right, so we've done our research, we've done our assessments, we've done some asset mapping, we've done some surveys. We have a ton of information. As librarians, we know it's our responsibility not to hoard this. If we hoarded all of the information we had, we would be dragons and not librarians. If that's your vibe, go for it. But instead, we are out here to share and to make change with this critical information that we have learned. And I do see a note in the chat that librarians will need help learning these tools too. Not all librarians at my library have this level of digital skills. Yes, exactly. That's where when we start out with assessing our own internal skill set, with assessing our own skills and our needs and building our digital skills first, we'll be able to help everyone else. It's just like when you put on the oxygen mask and it drops down and you pull the thing, you have to get your oxygen mask on before you help anyone else. You need to make sure that you and your staff are ready for digital inclusion internally before you're ready to turn that outwards. And you can do it simultaneously, but we do need to make sure that we're taking care of each other. So sharing what we've learned. This is where we have now collected all of this information that we're going to use to inform our digital skills programming. We're going to use it probably to write some grants. We're going to use it to say, hey, has anyone heard about the Digital Navigator program? That sounds fun. But also we can share this externally with our community members. Some of the ways that I have seen data and information shared on digital inclusion is really fantastic. It can be as simple as holding a community conversation and just making a PowerPoint and saying, we're going to talk about what we learned. Come to the library meeting room on Tuesday night. We've got donuts and coffee, and we're going to talk about what we learned. And we would like to have a listening session with it. You could take it to your mayor and say, like, all right, what are we doing together? I always like to just sort of take the data with me everywhere that I go and constantly share it out. Did you know? Here's this thing. I had tried to add data to my business cards at one point, and my business card department said no when I was in libraries, but I tried. It can also be as cool and interesting as an art project or an interpretation. I've seen digital inclusion data interpreted as art, as poetry, in zines before, or you could do a really formal written report or article that can be published locally, academically, or you can collaborate with someone in your area to really publish something to say, this is critical to the greater digital inclusion world. Here's what we've discovered about our community. I want to share one of our really critical and fascinating and beautiful resources. I definitely recommend taking some time to explore the Hawaii Digital Equity Ecosystem Map. This was created by the organization out in Hawaii that is the Digital Inclusion Hui, and it's led by a bunch of really, really engaged and awesome community members. And they look at their community and their ecosystem physically, oxygen, air, clouds, and they tied in all of the pieces of their digital inclusion ecosystem, the research that they've done, the people who are working in digital equity, all of the pieces that need to move forward, but framed it as part of their ecosystem. And this project was also led by some Native Hawaiians who talked about the importance of their ties to land and community. And all of this was such a grounding way of engaging with our information to share out, but also a really great way of framing the critical need for all of these different pieces in a way that I think we can all understand. So when you have 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or a whole hour, go ahead and click on that link and really explore it. It's definitely one of the places that I have found a lot of joy in thinking about digital equity as an ecosystem and thought about how to report out on what I'm learning and what I need to share. Okay, so that was a lot when it comes to doing the research, learning and sharing what we've got. But I think a lot of us are here to think about digital skills. In libraries, often the main thing we are executing are digital skills programs. We are currently saying digital skills. Digital literacy is another term many of you may have heard. We used to say digital literacy. But last February at Net Inclusion 2022, community members expressed a distaste for the phrase digital literacy. They felt that it was a bit overly academic and that it was a very black and white phrase. You were either literate or illiterate. It made them feel uncomfortable, and at some points it made them feel like they weren't very smart. So they asked us to start saying digital skills, because digital skills will always be a spectrum. For me, there are always digital skills I need to learn. Frankly, I could not build an asset mapping tool. I do not have those digital skills. So digital skills is a spectrum rather than a have or have not perspective. So that is just a quick note on that vocabulary change. We are encouraging folks to try out saying digital skills within their communities and see how it feels for everybody. So when we're planning our digital skills programming, there are a lot of sort of self-questions and analysis that we need to do when we're preparing for it. Within our toolkit, we guide you through some of the ways to really explore who we're hoping to serve, especially based on what you've learned in your data, in your assessment, in your survey, in your asset mapping, but also just sitting there looking at all of that and breaking it down into very specific questions of who is currently offering digital skills programs, who are currently attending them, because those are going to be very different populations. Who are we not serving, and who can we partner with to increase our reach? And these are all things that we can learn just from the previous research and getting to know our community we've done. Where is a very critical one that I do want to take a little bit more time for. Within our libraries, most of our libraries were not built with the idea that there would even be computers or charging going on. Can you share an emoji in the chat if you do not have enough electrical sockets for your everyday life? Like within my library, oh yeah. In my library, I think every time that facilities came through, it was me being like, can we add a plug? And they would be like, no. And I would be like, can we add 2 plugs? And they would just look at me and I'd be like, I'll just go cry now. Our libraries are not necessarily made for the work that we do. I don't know, the renovated part does. Oh my gosh, I love that. But can you imagine if we went back 30, 40 years and said, here in our libraries, we're going to be working one-on-one with community members to build their digital skills on a device? That architect would have a heart attack. So thinking about, does our library have the physical space to support classes or one-on-one appointments? How many computers do we have? Are the libraries in do the libraries in the specific areas of need have the capacity? Or are we going to be thinking about, well, we can only offer them in areas with computer labs, and the area that we've identified as really having a higher level of need doesn't have a computer lab? So thinking about your where are there third places and partners that we can work with? Are those spaces that we're going to be sending people to going to be safe and physically accessible? Are our librarians going to be able to go there and set up and be supported and host programming? Especially when it comes to building out a quick and speedy portable computer lab, which is something that a lot of libraries have been testing out prior to the pandemic. It's a bunch of laptops in a bag, some plugs, some chairs, and some tables. We've seen success with organizations like Libraries Without Borders. I actually, full disclosure, for the Watch and Learn initiative, I was a coordinator for the Baltimore locations where we set up permanent computer labs in laundromats. There are always places that we can build out our spaces and places to work with. And in another library that I worked in, we hosted computer classes outside in a parking space because we did not have enough space to get everybody inside. So we set up a table in the parking lot, brought out chairs, and it was a lovely outdoor computer class. When it was too sunny, you couldn't do it. So we can get really creative about our spaces and our partnerships when it comes to planning our digital skills programs. And there's really no way that we cannot find a place to host it unless truly we are just a lone library in a cornfield. If you are, I would love to know more. And then what will you teach? This one is really hard because we are seeing, as we saw on the Jamboard, all the different ways in which people will ask for help and the skills that they need. And figuring out what to teach can be based on what is already available for us in the way of curriculum. Do we think we need to write it all ourselves? Can we build out from what we have? Can we be referring people to pre-existing classes and lessons that are online? Do they have the skill set to do that? So it's a little bit about exploring your bigger digital skills resources options and curriculums online, ensuring that we are weaving online safety, security, and privacy into all of those lessons, because I saw how many people brought that up on the Jamboard. Everyone is thinking about security and privacy, but it's not really included everywhere. And making sure that our instructors are provided with as many resources as they can be to upskill themselves and to really build their confidence and skills when it comes to teaching and leading, as well as being able to just sort of execute that lesson or guide people through the databases. As librarians, many of us expected to be more of a conduit for information, and now we're these instructional leaders, and it can take a little bit of time to build that confidence in front of the room. I have a couple different tools that I wanted to share here, especially a blog post written by yours truly that is a quick up and down of what to do if you're thinking about building a digital skills curriculum. The first step is don't build your own, see what's out there first, see what you can modify, and then figure out how to fill the gaps. And also the digital skills framework provided by Digital Resilience in the American Workforce is really, really fantastic for learning about skills acquisition and all of the different options that are out there. Highly recommend that one as well. These are two tools that came out after the publication of the toolkit, so I want to make sure that I highlighted them and included them. And I think there's another program model that we talk about a lot and that we have featured in the toolkit, which is our digital navigators. Can I get an emoji in the chat from all my digital navigators who are joining me here? I will see all of you later on in the week, in the day as well, but I know we have digital navigators in the room, so please applaud yourselves. Heck yes, I see Carolyn, see some of my friends from Hudson Valley. I see the Ramapo Catskills folks. There are digital navigators in New York State, and I definitely recommend reaching out to Carolyn. Sorry, Carolyn, that I'm throwing you out there if you want to learn more. But the program model of digital navigators is about having these specifically trained staff members. In some areas, they are librarians who have been cross-trained. In other places, like in Connecticut, we had libraries hiring specific staff to be trained as these consistent community members who are available to provide holistic, individualized support through repeat interactions to facilitate that adaptation and access to affordable broadband, choosing the appropriate devices, and hosting and managing those digital skills trainings. So we have a little bit more on our website that you can really explore. But when I think about digital navigators, I usually think about what they've done to assist community members rather than what they're supposed to do every day. Our digital navigators are really working from a place of empathy. We have a digital navigators working group and all of our open source materials online so that you can explore whether or not digital navigators is something that will work for your library, as well as a whole chapter on it in the toolkit. We have some examples from the Connect Arizona group, as well as the Hudson Valley digital navigators and our friends from Connecticut. We've really seen the impact that digital navigators have been able to have on their communities. And one quote that I did not include in this slideshow, but I do want to share, was a community member out in Salt Lake City who says, "My computer is no longer my enemy, it is my friend." And I think that is what we really see when it comes to the human element of engaging in digital inclusion work. We are there as human beings to facilitate that connection and to make sure that people are feeling safe and that they are feeling understood when it comes to gaining those digital skills and working on their devices. So check out our resources. You can learn about all of these different pieces. We even have a Digital Navigators 101 webinar online. We'll have a new one up soon to really learn a little bit more about this model and see if it's feeling right for you. Also, I am one of the project managers and program managers on Digital Navigators, so feel free to reach out to me if you do have questions as well. It's one of the things that is near and dear to my heart. So one of the things Digital Navigators and everyone in digital inclusion work does is supporting internet access. And for us, I think we all know that we have our Wi-Fi options in our libraries, but we've also been able to really explore some different ways that we've been able to leverage that. Anybody here have an outdoor Wi-Fi zone that is on round the clock? Throw an emoji in the chat if you do. Or indicate that if you have drive-in Wi-Fi. A bunch of libraries in my area have upped their drive-in Wi-Fi options where you can come into their parking lots and park around the clock. Sarah has it. Yes, Julia has it. Yes, I'm loving this. The mobile Wi-Fi vans that we launched throughout our cities, we saw that in Brooklyn, we saw that sort of all over the nation. We were really getting very clever with expanding our Wi-Fi outside of the building because we know that everybody wants to come in. I love the not officially, but everyone can just use the Wi-Fi outside the building. Love that too. When we think about library access, most of that internet is in our buildings, but we can also help provide connections and support for home internet options. Two quick tools. We have the Affordable Connectivity Program, which I really hope all librarians are familiar with. This is the program that provides a discount on home internet for many different covered populations throughout the United States that basically takes your internet down to zero, and the free and low cost internet options. This is a page that NDIA manages. We have a fantastic guy named Miles on staff who created this, and it spends so much time updating it to the point of he often has to call all of these ISPs to get the most up-to-date information, which anybody who's ever called an ISP knows he's got to be a saint. But we keep up to date with all of the free and low cost internet options within different areas. If you know the service providers in your area, you will be able to explore all of the options there. Definitely recommend this for being able to help community members choose their service providers and really get involved. So it's activity time. Using that free and low cost internet options, we're going to do this as well as, I forgot to drop another piece in the link, which is our Broadband Now page, where we can explore what our options are in our area. So let me bring that one up. I want everyone to do one single attempt of using Broadband Now, which is another fantastic resource we recommend, where you can type in your zip code and search for all of the internet service providers that cover your zip code. And then after we have done that, I'd like you to head over to the free and low cost the low cost and free internet pages, and then take a look to see what of those providers are providing low cost options. I know that got a little complicated, but first we'll go to Broadband Now, and you can explore and see who your providers are in your area. If anybody has typed in their zip code and been surprised by what they've found, there is an ad up top, I know. You go ahead and unmute and let us know what you're discovering on Broadband Now. Anyone discovering there's only one option within their area, or is anyone else discovering there are far more options than they expected?
More than I expected. I see 6 of them. I thought there were about 2.
Mm-hmm. And some of these we're looking at, I've experienced like HughesNet and Viasat. If we look over at the type that it is, they may be satellite, but we do know that if they are able to serve one household within that zip code, they can say that they cover that zip code. But if we check over on the right-hand side, there's a place where we can see how available they are to that region. So in some places it says like 80% available, 100% available. Jinbei says that there are a lot they don't recognize. So now, once we've explored some of those ones that we don't recognize, when we click on the free and low cost internet plans, let's see if there are any of those that we don't recognize that are eligible for any of these free and low cost plans. So I've dropped the link in the chat there, and you can look for a name of one of those ones that looks a little bit suspect. I am going to do this along with you because I just saw one that I don't know, and therefore I want to know if they have a free or low cost plan, because my neighbor, Miss Millie, is looking for an option and an alternative. And we have options for our ACP only plans, and that's the Affordable Connectivity Program. And then when you scroll down, there are options for other ones as well, with eligibility requirements and without eligibility requirements. Jackson Energy Authority E+ broadband, curious. Starlink. So Starlink is a satellite option, and they are coordinated by a well-known tech CEO, Elon Musk. And they're available in some areas, but some of my friends who were hoping to get Starlink within their regions were really disappointed that they weren't able to. And I hear we've got some power outages happening throughout New York. So if you're coming back and joining us, we are currently exploring. I'm going to drop a link in the chat again. So we are looking around on the free and low cost internet pages and exploring what's available on using broadband now. We're finding our service providers for our area, and then we're also checking to see what their options are. Anyone else have anything they want to share from this activity? Anything that really surprised or shocked you, or any disappointments when it comes to not finding enough in the way of free and low cost options in your area? So we do have some details, Denise, on undocumented folks and ACP. Definitely reach out to our listserv as well, and we'll be able to get you connected for a bunch of the details on how undocumented folks are able to be eligible for ACP. We've got somebody who's looking at surrounding communities and the providers, 2.2% available. One local family could afford low-cost internet, but it was not at the $125 charge, the provider service charge for setting it up. Yep. Several are less than 10% in our zip code. Yeah, fantastic. So I feel like everyone here has a really strong grasp on the situation that we're working with regard to, sorry, I'm adjusting my lighting a little bit because I realize I'm kind of falling entirely into the dark. I don't want to look like I have fully disappeared, but this is the joy of using all natural lighting on a webinar. So we really dug into how all of these tools work, and I recommend this for working with our community members each day and for really having a strong understanding of what is available, as well as guiding our community members into using these tools themselves. So in addition to supporting our internet access, we have supporting access to appropriate devices. And I think in libraries, we often encounter folks using devices that are not ideal for the jobs that are at hand. Within the toolkit, we have shared this fantastic graphic that's really great for helping people to make decisions and to be able to make informed choices on our devices. I like to be able to come up with creative solutions for which devices will do the best for our community members. And one of the things that we think about a lot is the need for a device that serves our lives, whatever that may look like. And when it comes to tablets, there are some fantastic options. Like if you are going to be messaging a family member or typing mostly in a language that does not use the standard Latin alphabet, using that touchscreen adaptable keyboard may be the best choice. If you have somebody who travels a lot and is going to be doing some technical work, but mostly is not going to be near a power source, a smartphone may be their best option. But often helping our community members to move from a smaller screen device to a larger screen device is going to be really critical for their success. And it's about helping to make the right choices when it comes to our appropriate devices. We'll get to where we get them in a minute. But first, hotspots, devices or internet. Both. This is a conversation we've been having both in libraries and within our community. Is a hotspot a device or is it an internet option? I like to consider it both, and I include it within our devices conversations because most often in libraries, we are concerned with circulating this item, maintaining this item, making sure that it's got its batteries and all of its things. But this is a great time that we can also get really connected with our disconnected community. If we have folks who are coming in regularly borrowing a hotspot, that is a moment where we can have a discussion about whether or not they'd like to learn a little bit more about their local internet options, learn a little bit about free and low cost internet, as well as making sure that they have the appropriate device for the task. We love hardwired internet. Many of us are on that right now. There's something plugged into a wall. We may be connected to our router by Wi-Fi. In our libraries, most likely there's an Ethernet cable somewhere. But sometimes that's not the best choice for someone's life. If you need your internet to travel with your children to their grandparents' house, back to your house so they can do homework, sometimes you'll take it to work with you so that your kids can hang out in the office while you're in the warehouse working. You need your internet to be able to move with you. So a hotspot is fantastic for that, but we can also suggest other alternatives that are a little bit more sustainable and powerful than a hotspot. Many of us have hotspots circulating in our libraries, and they are amazing in the way of gap networks for our community members. Refurbished devices, everyone's favorite thing to come out of the digital inclusion movement. They are low-cost, eco-friendly options when it comes to getting community members connected with devices. Often we have a couple different guides to refurbish devices within our toolkit that I really encourage you to engage with. They're fantastic for organizations and community members where cost may be a barrier. And something else that I really like to emphasize when libraries are deciding whether or not to go with refurbished or new or donated devices is that refurbishers are making a holistic effort to participate in digital inclusion, offering digital skills and professional training to their workers, and really creating sort of their whole own digital equity ecosystem within their work, which I think is fantastic. Another thing that we think about in libraries when it comes to devices is the loaning or owning situation. Long-term, short-term loaning or owning. Often we see within funding structures, we may have short-term loans, we're thinking 3 weeks, but we've found in many different areas that long-term loans and ownership is particularly advantageous to our communities. If you're being approached by funders or community members or other options saying we'd like to provide devices, have a bit of a conversation about what the loan or own option would be for those devices. Many libraries are working with organizations like PCs for People and Digitunity to provide devices through some of the ARPA funding and other grants out there that are devices folks get to keep. But also it's just as important to have those loanable devices so that people can have things for a stopgap, a short period of time and just to address their immediate need. So that covers much of our loaning and devices. Devices are really critical to the work that we do because people can't practice their digital skills unless they have something to practice them on. I'm going to get through the last couple topics that we have to share, and then I want to make sure that we create a lot of space for questions at the end and fulfill all of your questions, needs, and get everybody answered before we wrap up. Increasing impact. This is one of sort of the things that we can do throughout our work in digital inclusion. One of the things I should have also mentioned at the beginning is while researching and learning about our community is really critical when we first get started, that is a great place to begin. Nothing else within the Digital Inclusion Toolkit is prescriptive or linear. Nothing needs to be done in a certain order. We can increase our impact while we are already still in the research phase. We can begin understanding our digital inclusion ecosystem while we're doing asset mapping. We can start building our digital skills programming and training our staff while we're still trying to figure out exactly what it is our community members need to learn. There is no right or wrong way to get involved in digital inclusion activities. The only wrong way to do it, I would say, is not doing it at all. And I know that every library is already engaged in some level of digital inclusion, so I think we're all doing it right. Our digital inclusion ecosystems. This is a really great way to increase our impact. And this is like an understanding of the combination of programs and policies and everything that goes into specifically digital inclusion work. And it's a bit of that coordinating with our friends and community members, maybe all the folks that we discovered during our asset mapping or during our research, bringing everybody together when we report out and say, we are the digital inclusion ecosystem in our community. We are the people who are here doing the work and building really towards this digital equitable society. Coalitions. Does anyone here have a digital inclusion or digital equity coalition in their area? Are you a member of it? Anybody want to shout out their coalition in the chat? I know we have to have at least 2 or 3. I'll give you a second while I share on coalitions. Oh yes, excellent. Adding funders to the definition of ecosystems. I will get that back to our definitions team. When it comes to coalitions, we know that coalitions are super critical for our communities. As libraries, specifically, small libraries, big libraries, yes, Western New York Digital Equity Coalition, happy to have you here. NYCCAL Digital Inclusion Coalition, Southern Tier Expanded Digital Equity Coalition, Onondaga County one. Not sure what the name is, but we're here and we're enthusiastic about it. That's the energy I love. Your community, your coalition. Julia, you demonstrate that perfectly. If you're aware of a digital inclusion coalition in your area, definitely see if you can have a conversation, seek them out. I have a feeling many of us are already connected, but these are the folks who are really going to be helpful in maintaining our programming and helping us support it, building those partnerships, and asking us to help and fill in all of our different needs and especially the gaps in our digital inclusion ecosystems. If you're interested in forming a coalition, if you're already in a coalition, if you are sitting here going, Lo, what is a digital equity coalition? I really recommend investigating our Digital Inclusion Coalition guidebook. It is, hello to the Finger Lakes Digital Inclusion Coalition. It's linked in the chat as well as here and in the Digital Inclusion Toolkit, but it is a start to finish guide on building a digital inclusion coalition and all of the planning processes and community work that goes into it. My team members who worked on this put their full heart and soul into it and talked to so many different coalitions, including a bunch of them who were just shouted out in the chat, to really figure out what it is that makes a digital inclusion coalition thrive. Partnerships, stronger together. This is really critical for our digital inclusion work for the rest of our lives and the whole future. There are so many reasons that partnerships are critical. For me, when I was doing digital inclusion work, it's because I'm one person and I would get really tired. So making sure that our digital inclusion partnerships are available to help us reach wider audiences and also niche audiences. Specifically working in some regions, there may be communities that are a little bit more closed off, and working with a partner will help us to reach those communities, senior centers, specific other community areas. Working with established organizations can help you to really build that community trust. When we're first showing up offering digital skills, it can be a little bit confusing and folks can be a little wary of us. But if they are able to have a community organization that says, you trust us, we trust the library, we'd all like to work together, you can kind of skip over the whole process of really having to build and earn trust together because you're kind of getting verified. Sharing the commitment and the workload is the big one. You're able to share your commitment to digital inclusion, split that workload as best you can. I created a tool, and we have a tool for effective partnerships on page 63 of the toolkit. That's a great way to map out sort of your responsibilities and the lift. One of the things that I've heard when it comes to partnerships and some of the advice that we give in the digital inclusion world is we're in this partnership, but no one's really sure what they're supposed to be doing. So I encourage mapping out your vision together from the very beginning. And if it involves bringing that worksheet to your first interaction and saying, let's write this all out together, or just having that sort of in the back of your head of these are some things we should be thinking about when we build a partnership. Who does what? Where will we be taking responsibility? Who takes the lead? How do we check in to make sure that we're on the same page? Partnerships are a lot like relationships in life. So we want to make sure that we're treating them just the same. Speaking of communities and partnerships, this is where I like to encourage everyone as we bring it down to questions and wrapping up to join the NDIA community. We partnered with the New York State Library to create this digital inclusion toolkit, but we couldn't have done it without the resources and tools that our community members have helped us develop, and also the ones that they are constantly recommending and sharing with us. There are a bunch of options for joining, and you can join as an affiliate. You can join as a friend. None of you should be corporate supporters, so we don't even have to talk about that. What you can get out of it is a listserv with tons of free resources, monthly community calls, newsletters, and the discussions that we have within our listserv are really critical to the work that we do. Most recently coming to mind, we had the staff member that took over for me when I left Baltimore City was posting in our listserv asking for details on how other libraries were managing data affiliated with their emergency, the ECF funding when it came to hotspots. And a couple of different librarians were able to give guidance on the ways that they've been managing their data. And they had a great conversation about all of the ways in which they've been maintaining documentation and forms surrounding that. So there's always a great conversation going on. I highly recommend it. And especially if there are ever questions where you're not quite sure who to ask and you don't know if asking one of the staff here at NDIA or within your digital inclusion world is the right place to do it, you can always ask our listserv, and you can be in contact with literally thousands of people around the country and honestly around the world at this point. We have some folks in Aotearoa, we have some folks in England, and a couple of other areas that have joined up with NDIA because they like what we're doing and they like what they learn. So that is the hard sell on getting involved. Becoming an affiliate for your organization is generally free, and it provides so much for you and your team. Okay, so this is the generalized thank you. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of the Digital Inclusion Toolkit that I had so much fun writing and working on. And I've had so much fun getting to know everything that the New York State Library is working on and is planning for the future. I had a great time exploring the digital equity portal during this work. One other thing that I would be remiss if I didn't tell you is we will be hosting our annual conference. It will be in February of 2023 in San Antonio. So if you need a little bit of sun and you have some development funds, we definitely encourage librarians to come and join us to learn about digital inclusion programming and best practices. And there are practitioner sessions specific to really boots on the ground work during every single session. And I know some of you are already planning on being there, so I'm very excited to get to see you in person again and to really learn together in 2023 in February. So that concludes all of the part where I'm talking to you. Now I would love to take questions, clarifications, if you'd like me to specifically share individual areas, pages, toolkits, or expand on anything, ask me now. And I may also have Amanda check in the chat to see if there are other questions I missed from earlier. I know I just offloaded a lot of information to you. And yes, the slides will be shared, and all of the links are also will be available from this. The links will be in the slides, as well as most of them are in the toolkit. The few that are not will be available from this. And this whole webinar has been recorded and will be shared on NDIA's website in case you have any questions there. Oh, and Amanda made a quick links document that we will be sharing with you. Amanda is my left and right hand. We need a digital navigator training for our librarians in the country. They need the time to do it, and therein lies the difficulty. One of the pieces of digital navigators that can be a little bit more difficult is really balancing the obligations of maintaining our libraries, as well as learning new skills and being able to execute the digital navigator work. If you do have questions about digital navigators, digital navigator trainings, all of that, you can always email me. And I realized I have not put my email in the chat. So you can email me. I am Lo. All of our emails at NDIA are just our name followed by digitalinclusion.org. Someone has shared the new outreach grant that can fund digital navigators. Tor is out here looking at NOFOs coming out of the FCC. Yes, sharing the link for the toolkit again. I'll have Amanda drop that in the chat in just a second. Fantastic. New digital navigator trainings as they're using ARPA funding. Amazing. We do encourage anyone who is hosting a digital navigator program to become an affiliate, and then you'll be able to join our digital navigator working group, where we bring together hundreds of digital navigators across the country to talk about their best practices, things that are going well, work together to solve problems, and engage in a very specific Just Digital Navigator listserv, where they really troubleshoot everything from customer interactions and behaviors to the ACP program and working with ISPs. It's so valuable, and also just the joy that our digital navigators are able to share in and work together is really unique. And I will also then, if everyone is comfortable, I will pause my recording. So if there are